Good morning. I hope everyone had a wonderful holiday weekend this past weekend. We will be joining you guys shortly. We're going to wait a few minutes to get going. We still have some people joining for today, so sit tight and we'll be right back. Good morning again. Thanks everybody for joining us today. We're just giving a few more minutes to have people join us for this webinar, and we will get you out of here. Obviously, we want to focus on getting this information out quickly and then getting you back to your day. All right, so we are 2 minutes past, so we'll get you going because we promised you 20 minutes of content. Obviously, there's some Q&A afterwards, so please hang around and we are gladly going to answer any questions that you guys have. So again, welcome to the webinar series, the Workforce Hub University, and we will get started. So my name is Holly Helt. I'm the Director of Customer Success here at Swipe Clock. Also joining me today will be Travis Richens. He's our Director of Product Marketing. And we have been doing this series for, I don't know, about 6-7 months now. And we are covering lots of different topics that are really relevant to the product and kind of solving some of those day-to-day issues. Just a reminder, because a lot of you guys are on different packages that we offer in the Workforce Hub products. So the Essentials products, really just keeping with the timekeeping, simple setup. Advanced has the full timekeeping package, also is scheduling included, also geofencing, and then the Workforce Hub Plus package, and that has really our applicant tracking, benefits management, workflows, and all the time and attendance. So all the goodies in the Plus package. So if you're new to the webinar series, we usually cover everything in Plus and then just kind of understand where you may land in this. And please feel free to ask questions if you don't know what package you're on, or if something looks enticing to you that that we're covering that may not be available to you currently. All right, today's webinar. So we are really focusing on some admin items. So we're going to be covering overtime transparency. So how are we, most of your setups are obviously done at this point, but how do we change those when things happen? So we'll cover a little bit more information around some of those new overtime rules. So hopefully you've been seeing some of that stuff in the news, or your CPA firms or whoever's doing your payroll is providing some of that information. So what does that look like? How do we change it? Same for some of those meals and break compliances. So those things are changing, usually on a yearly basis, hopefully not too frequently, but we really want to cover how those rules and where do we find those settings so that you can either work on those yourself or again, ask us for help to kind of get those things done on the back end if needed. And then we'll kind of cover some of that org structure and how you change that as you grow, or you're adding locations, you're adding positions. How does that affect your current setup? And then how do we, get you guys to not have to reach out to us and manipulate those accounts yourself. And then, like I said, we'll end in some Q&A. So like I said, we have some information on this new overtime rules. So in the chat section, you'll see a handout section. We've got a downloadable flyer that might be some interest to you guys if you're not familiar with how those rules may be affecting some of your employees and obviously your pocketbook. And then ultimately we have a blog, which Lindy, could you put that in the chat, please? We'll have blog information also. So we do a blog on a very regular basis around a lot of HR topics. I highly suggest you guys at least follow that, read it on your own times, but there's great content in there around relevant topics, what's going on as far as in the news or things that might be relevant to you guys on a daily basis. So I strongly suggest grabbing some blog information. Make sure you're staying up to date on some of the changing rules. All right, we will cover that later. So now I'm going to transition this over to Travis, and he can start covering how this actually looks in the product, and we will cover a little bit more in depth these particular items.
Awesome, thanks, Holly. Go ahead and take the screen here. If you got to give me permission there, Holly. I can't take it right currently.
Okay.
There we go. Hold on 1 second. Let's see if I can get that one. How's that?
Perfect.
All right, sweet. All right, well, yeah, thanks everyone for joining. So we'll jump into it here to make this short and sweet. We're first going to talk about overtime. And so those of you that are already using WorkforceHub, we are in the Plus platform or Plus package. So just like Holly said, there may be some things in here that you don't have in your package, and that's completely fine. Everything today that I'll show off, including the overtime, break, and meals, those are available in all of our packages. So if you're on Essentials or Advanced or Plus, it's all there. So to get into those admin settings, from the top header bar, you're going to see Admin. We're going to go ahead and click on the Admin button. We then come over to Timekeeping here. Timekeeping, and then we want to click on Time Policies, and then we come down to Overtime. So with the overtime policies we put in place, here are the ones that we have available. These are pre-selected for you. There's ones, if you are in California, you know that you have different overtime rules than most of the country does. And then Nevada also has some unique overtime rules as well, specifically related to like a rolling 24-hour period and things like that. So, but for most people, for most small businesses, the standard FLSA overtime rules do work. And then we have a few ways that you can configure those. So you have a daily overtime. I know that there's some states that do have a daily. So if you work over 8 hours in a day, then anything over 8 hours in a day would be considered overtime. And so you can check that, and then you can also set the hour amount that is. If that's 8 hours or something else, you could change that. The standard one that I hear a lot and see a lot of is just the weekly overtime. So anything after 40 hours in a week would go to overtime and would be set to overtime. We also have a daily double time and a weekly double time rule as well. So some states like Arizona, they have some specific rules about that. And then there also is some rules in manufacturing specific industries as well as agricultural industries. So these are really easy for you guys to change. Like I said, if these change for you, you can easily come in and make the updates on your own. You wouldn't need to reach out to us to do that. These are all configurable by you on your end. Now, if there's something here that you guys do not see, say that you have a specific overtime rule, maybe you're on a government contract or something like that, that you need different overtime rules for, please reach out to us. We do have the ability to put in custom overtime rules for you. This would include like a custom script or something. I know there are rules, specific overtime rules for, say, maybe groups of employees, maybe this employee or this group of employees gets overtime after so many hours, or if they're in a specific group. If you need to get that granular in your business, please let us know. Please reach out, because we can be able to set that up for you. All right, before we jump on from here, I'll show you, I also want to jump in to show you how the time card looks when overtime is hit, and then how to run a few reports to show that overtime value. And so you can stay on top of that. Before we jump over there, like Holly mentioned, there are a few changes this year to more exempt kind of salary employees. And those changes specifically relate around the salary amount. And so let's say that you have a salaried employee making $38,000 a year. They wouldn't really need to track their time, right? It's a salary employee. You're assuming they're going to work 40 hours a week or whatever you've agreed upon. Some laws came out this year that go into effect in July 1st, I believe, and it raises that salary amount. So that means that if you do not raise that salary of that employee, then more than likely you'll need to track their hours, and they'll be needed to be provided overtime for any hours over the 40 that they do work. So as you can see here, we have some things in place that can help you with that. Also, your accountant, CPAs, they'll have a lot of information on that as well. But if you're in that situation where you have maybe a few employees coming off a salary going to more of like an hourly pay, we can certainly help you out there, get them into the system, have them start punching, and we can track that time and their overtime in WorkforceHub as well. All right, so now that that's in place, we want to jump over to the time card. I want to show you how these rules work. So right now I have a weekly overtime set for 40 hours in a work week. So if we jump over the time card here, I've got some dummy data in to show you. You see right off the bat, I've just populated Eaton's card right here. You can see that on our overview, so as a manager view or an admin view, this will show all the employees' regular hours worked, overtime hours worked, and then any of that total time as well. So this gives you a great overview of all that's happening during a specific time frame or pay period for these employees. You go into Eaton though, you can see here that I've just thrown in some random times here to show you how that overtime will hit with that specific rule once they exceed 40 hours in a week. So it shows off here. If we went back to that overtime rule and we say we wanted to update that, maybe we also wanted to include a daily overtime after 8, let me show you how that would show up. So that's just saved. We then jump over back to the time, and we can see here. And you can see here that we are observing that anything over 8 hours in a day would be considered overtime. And then the overtime rules as well, all your calculations and whatnot would show up in the summary down below. So several ways that you can configure this. Like I said, we got the California rule in there that's pretty standard, and then the Nevada overtime rule, and then the custom configuration. If you have things that are not clickable in WorkforceHub, we can also help you with those as well. So, all right.
One
so
thing
we're
I
showing you how to. Yeah, go ahead.
Travis, I'm sure some of you are like, oh, well, what if I change my setting? How is that going to affect my past pay periods? Now, I think we've covered this in quite a few other webinars as well. It's super important to be finalizing those pay periods and locking that information down. And that way, nothing will go back and change that. So anything previously locked down won't be applied to this new rule. You're just going to see that moving forward. So you'll have a good point in time where things aren't going to go back and look different to what you sent over to your payroll. So I just wanted to clarify that. Anything that's finalized is not going to be affected if you change any of those rules.
Good point. Yeah, and the finalizing is done through the payroll review. And so you can just click there and we walk you through the process. We walk you through everything in the product or in that time, that pay period, excuse me, to make sure everything's accurate, everything's correct, and then you are able to lock that pay period down. So no changes can be made. If there are changes to overtime or maybe a different accrual policy, something like that, that would not affect locked pay periods. So. All right, so we've talked about how to configure new overtime rules. We talked about customization of overtime rules, how it's shown on the time card. We just showed that off. And then really want to jump in just to the reports. Let's see if this will play nice with me today. Here we go. There's a few ways that you can see overtime. I would say the most common way to do this is just to run a summary report. You can run a summary report. This will then, you can click on the current pay period that you're on, and then you can just run it as is. This will provide you any overtime hours for each employee in a line-by-line basis. So you can see the regular hours worked and then the overtime hours worked. You can export this to CSV. You can also sign up for, and we covered this in our last webinar a bit, so I don't want to spend too much time here on it, but is a daily auto email. So if you go ahead and click on that, if you're in the Plus package, you can go ahead and click on the daily auto email, and you can sign up for that. And that email is an overview, basically a summary of the previous day's work. And so every morning, say around 6 or 7 a.m., whenever you set that time up to be delivered to you, that email will be sent. You can then see everything that was worked, all the punches, any overtime, any missing punches, things like that from the previous day. And it would also give you a summary for the pay period so far. So great reports to keep on top of your overtime. I think that daily auto email is probably the one that's the most utilized and the one that we kind of push new customers to. It really is a great tool. So you can get that information right the morning of that previous day work. It doesn't require you to jump into the system. You just get that email right each and every morning. So, all right. Next, we want to talk about the break and meal rule that we have in place as well. So we're going to head back to the admin portion. We're going to jump into timekeeping, and we're going to click time policies. We're going to come down to breaks and meals. So breaks and meals. What this is we allow you to add a button to the time clock. Now this button, when we click track employees breaks, let's say, just go ahead and save that. We go back to that dashboard. You can see the web clock here. We just have the ability to clock in, clock out. There's a transfer button. It is always there. But the clocking in, the clocking out, if we wanted to add, say, a break button or a meal button, we just come back to the admin portion, come to that break and meals. We can go ahead and add those buttons in here. Once we do this, those buttons will not only just show up here on the web clock, but if you have a hardware clock of ours, if you have a physical clock, a biometric or anything like that, those buttons will also be updated on that side. Also, if you have employees using the mobile app, those buttons will be updated as well. So that really keeps everything the same, regardless of what punching platform you're using of ours, online, mobile app, or a physical clock. This setting works for all of those clocks. So a couple things to talk about for breaks. If breaks are paid, you can set up a rule for that. So breaks earned by time card day. So there's a couple things here. If you're familiar with these, or if you're in a state or an industry that requires this, you'll know that you can set this up in two different ways. Maybe if employees get a break every 3 hours, you can set that up by hours worked, or you can set it up just by the number of breaks that employee can get in a single day as worked. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the hours worked because I see this as the most common. And I think that threshold is every 3 hours, how many hours worked for each break to be earned, and then the duration, you can set the duration of this. If it's a 15-minute break, if it's a 20-minute break, whatever that is, you can put that number in there. And then you can also choose if the break goes longer than, let's say, your threshold of 15 minutes, let's say it goes longer than, let's say, 20 minutes, that whole break will be unpaid. And so if this applies to you, you kind of understand why that is. If it's not something that you're familiar with or you need to use, of course, you can just uncheck it. But this basically says if somebody takes a break, they clock in for a break, and they don't clock out, let's say they clock out at 21 minutes, that whole break, there's a break penalty, and so they will not receive that break. Same thing goes for meals. If meals are paid, you can kind of see for the same options here for the breaks as for meals. We have an unpaid restriction, and also we have one that's restrict a clock in if meal is less than 30 minutes. So this is the one that I see that's most used. I don't necessarily see breaks being unpaid for too often. I do see that breaks are paid, and this is kind of the standard setup that I'm seeing out there. On the meals, it's by time card day, and so typically, let's see duration from each meals. I would see this 30 minutes. And then we see a lot of people activate this rule here, which means if somebody wants to, you're requiring your employees to take a 30-minute lunch, go ahead, take your lunch, take a break, and you got the employees that take a 15-minute lunch and they go and punch right back in and get back to work. This would not allow that. If you check this box here and you set the duration time, if somebody took a lunch for maybe 15 minutes or so, they try to clock back in, they're going to be told at the clock. Once again, that clock is web clock, physical clock, or mobile app. They'll be told that they are not able to clock in. They have not taken a long enough lunch. So, all right, so I'm going to leave everything on here as it is. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Then I want to jump back to that dashboard and show you that these clock buttons now exist. So you have the option. Let's see, I'm just going to finish that punch. You have the option that that employee does to start a break, start a meal, and clock out. So if we wanted to go out for a lunch, you can see that the only option that we have on the way back is we're going to go ahead and end that meal. Once again, if we had that rule in place that did not allow us to punch in, say, for 30 minutes, it would give us a notification here saying we're not able to punch. Your lunch has not been completed yet. So, all right, now we're moving along here with time, trying to hit everything here today. The last item that I want to show off is the org chart. So we've talked about overtime. We've talked about meals and breaks and how you can stay compliant with that. The last item I want to point out is just the org chart structure. So org charts, this can be great to kind of show internal org. It also sets you up for success if you're using time off requests. And so a lot of this, when you get into the employees, you can set up managers. So for example, if we click here, you can see roles. We can set multiple roles for an employee. So you can set a company admin, you got a manager. We could talk about onboarding and benefits at a later date, but the most commonly used are company admin and managers. In order to set up a manager, though, you also need to make sure that manager is attached to a specific employee. That is for time off requests, and so the right time off request goes to the correct employee. But you can also see here under employment, you can see that the organization area here, if you wanted to use things such as department, a position, locations, let's say that I keep using a government contract for an example, but I guess I've worked with a lawn care company as well, where they really just focused on big company or big corporate accounts. So what they would do is under the location tab, they would put those contracts or those locations that they would need employees, and those employees from a drop down when they punched in would click on that location. So to set everything up in here, if you've been in here and you click on the pencil icon and you're like, man, how do I get more information in here, right? If I wanted to add another department or something, this is all done on the admin side. So everything in the organization area happens in the admin. We then come to company, and then you go to org setup. Here is where you're able to create your departments. You can create different locations, and then you can create those positions as well. So once you have all these in place, those will show up in the drop downs for your employees. You can then start, once you have all this stuff in place, you then can start to build out that org chart. And so you can have specific, people on here with their correct roles, what they're doing, who their manager is, things like that. So,
Trav, will you
all
show
right.
them where you can update some of that stuff? Some
At
of
the
their
employee level?
organizational data. No, the admin level where they're adding those options.
Oh, adding the departments?
Organization, yeah.
Yeah, right here, right? Yeah, you just come in here and click on this.
Yep. So if you want them to appear in the drop down to select, you obviously need to put them in the system first if they don't exist. So as you add departments, locations, or positions, and this information is really important in a lot of different aspects. We can create groups off of these. This is tied to some of that scheduling information. So there's good reason to kind of have some of those things filled out other than like just having a more complete record. So that's also found in the admin tab to add some of those additional items in.
Yeah, you also have employee types is here, so you can set up full-time, part-time. This goes hand in hand with those. Maybe you're exempt, like I said, that law coming up that kind of talks about the salary range and how that's changed. But yeah, you got employee types, and then you got the org set up here. So
Great.
did we do it? I think we met our time. Did all right. We can move
Yeah.
on to questions if we have them.
All right. Obviously, there's a lot more settings under the admin tab that I would encourage you guys, if you're admins, to take a look at, sift through. Obviously that setup was done when you initially went through either implementation or did some of those items yourself. If you have any questions on those, let us know, but we will open it up to questions now, just in general about either things that we covered today, additional resources we could provide you, or maybe just something else that's on your mind. Trav, I think you covered it perfectly.
We did it, huh? More people are eating lunch because that sounds good for me right now. Well, sweet. Yeah, like Holly mentioned, don't want to keep anyone longer than we need to, but if you have any questions, Holly's available. I'm available. Reach out if you guys have any issues or need additional help.
Oh, yes. We just dropped in the chat, though, the next webinar for June 26th. So hopefully you guys aren't on vacation. And if you are, you can always sign up and we will send you a recording. This next one, we're going to be covering the benefits of geofencing, kind of how we're managing remote employees or how they're using their mobile devices so we can track things properly. And then also some of those clock lockouts to help with overtime and some of the other items that are beneficial with that. So please take advantage of that webinar, or at least sign up and get your own recording, and then obviously listen on your own time. Well, I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. We will hopefully see you back in June, and that's it. Have a great day.
Cool. Thanks, Holly. Thanks, everyone. See ya.